Hi, welcome to Music Philosophy, the podcast in which I discuss both music and its relation to philosophy. Today, we're going to continue with improvisation. Now, for those of you that watched my show last week, yes, that was an actual improvisation. I was going right off the top of my head on that. And in fact, you should have heard some of the blunders and mistakes I did before that. Let's see. What I was wanting to cover is my thoughts on what improvisation is and how it relates to and is different from music composition. I like to think of it as kind of analogous to the process of writing. Now, for those of you who have read Ayn Rand's posthumously published works on the art of nonfiction and the art of fiction, the process that she describes of writing something is very similar in many respects to how a piece of music is written, or at least how I write music. First of all, you start sketching ideas and coming up with that. And for music, that includes the process of improvisation. Improvisation relies largely upon a musician's subconscious knowledge of music. From all the music that he's ever listened to, played, analyzed, or written, a musician over time builds up a large collection of mental material that he can draw upon and synthesize and reintegrate in any number of ways to create new music right off the top of his head spontaneously. It's an ability that takes several years to develop and is really wonderful and can help you in many ways as a musician once you have that ability. It's basically, for the musician that can do it, kind of like speaking in another language. Unfortunately, music can't translate into concrete concepts like language can, but the process of communicating through music feels the same way like talking, like what I'm doing right now. But when you begin the process of composition, you have to look at where all you've gathered ideas in the past, including sketched out ideas, improvised ideas, and you begin to learn to synthesize them, and you create a plan of sort of how, or more or less, how you want to go about conveying what it is you want to convey. And so generally, you'll know what kind of themes are going to work with this project and how they relate to each other. This isn't always the case, but because the nature of music is a little bit different, sometimes you can begin a piece without really knowing exactly how everything is going to fit together. And certainly, there are a lot of pieces I've written that are like that. Now, the composition aspect is where you take all this material and you begin to weed out what is non-essential and integrate that which is essential and arrange it into its perfect final form. So it is the opposite end of, especially when you get to the part where you're arranging. So mentally, it's the opposite end of improvisation. Improvisation is almost entirely subconscious, whereas composition is a very conscious process. Now, for me, when I compose, I usually start out from sketches in improvisations. Then I move on to synthesize that material and create kind of a roadmap of where I go. And then the conscious part of it is finalizing that roadmap and fixing everything into that form. For instance, many of the questions that you face when you're doing the fine detail work of composition don't even occur to you as you're improvising, especially improvising solo. For instance, you don't have to think about instrumentation, or you don't have to think about voice leading. Everything that you do in improvisation is automatic. But in the composition, you have to determine what instruments are going to best express your themes. You're going to want to consider tempos. You're going to want to consider the architecture or the form that the final piece takes. And of course, very important to the piece is where and when and how do you reach the most climactic point of the piece, and how do you resolve that, or even if you resolve that. Now, one thing I believe is that the nature of your source material from which you construct your composition will definitely provide you clues, if not outright answers, for how this material is to be organized. I believe, for me personally, I believe everything that comes from the form, the final shape, the instrumentation, all of that comes directly from your source material. In a way, it already knows what it wants to become. And it's up to you to figure out what is the most proper thing to do with this, given the nature of the material. Now, there is also a lot of question of style that comes in, and a lot of this will translate directly from your improvisation all the way through your finished compositions. And I know certainly for me it does. What I'm planning to do in a few series of videos interspersed with some of my other work is revisit this improvisation that I just did last week and go about the steps of how I would work this either into or make it become a finalized and complete composition. So I hope you stick with me through that. Before I close out today's podcast, I would like to announce that I do have a Twitter feed that you can follow now. Just go to twitter.com and look for Adam Buker, and you can follow me there. I also now have my Last FM profile that's up, and I suggest all of you that are Last FM users to go check it out. You can also buy my album from Last.fm. And finally, to those Twitter subscribers that have already subscribed, thank you very much. Tell your friends about me, and thank you very much for subscribing. And as always, drink more coffee. Thank you.